Member four, mic check.
Copy.
Member five, final mic check.
Copy.
Any others need checking or we're clear?
We are clear. Head back to
All right.
base. Check 1, 2. Check 1, 2.
Hey guys, we're about to get started. We're 1 minute late, 2 minutes late, but we're gonna get started here in just a second. Good morning. Thank you all for being here. This is the, I believe, fourth meeting of the Senate Committee to eliminate Georgia's income tax. And thank you all for being present here today. We've got a full lineup, and we're going to start the way the Senate typically starts all of its meetings, with an invocation. I've asked our pro tem nominee, Larry Walker, if he doesn't mind leading an invocation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bow with me, please. Heavenly Father, we come to you today with humble hearts and grateful hearts for all the blessings you've given us. And thank you for this beautiful day. Thank you for the opportunity to live in Georgia and serve our fellow Georgians in the Senate. Please lead and guide us in our decisions and give us discernment, and may what we do be pleasing to you. All these things we ask in Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pro Tem nominee Walker. To lay the foundation, kind of get us started here, remember what we're here to talk about doing to begin with. I think it's evident if you've watched anything in recent news stories or even the recent elections that folks really are feeling the pinch in their own homes, whether it be on groceries, gas, childcare. And I think they said that again last Tuesday night. So the largest portion of anyone's take-home pay that we deal with is the income tax. It's the largest portion that we take out of their paycheck, obviously, as an income tax, 5.19% now. So we were appointed originally by Lieutenant Governor Jones to look at eliminating Georgia's income tax in its entirety. The reasons for this, I think, were competitiveness with other states. Remember that Tennessee and Florida have already done away with their state income tax. North Carolina and South Carolina are talking about the same. Missouri is now on that path. If you want to say Alabama, they're not doing it, doesn't sound like, but move just one state over to Mississippi. And Mississippi has already laid out a plan largely modeled on what we did several years ago with triggers to attempt to do away with their state income tax too. So that's the world we're operating in, from a competitiveness issue as a state with surrounding states tackling this topic. And then just as a real world issue too for Georgians. When you see that they're having a hard time paying for, like I already said, gas, groceries, and childcare, the biggest portion of their check we take is the income tax. We should be trying to follow suit with other states too, to return that money to them and allow them to tackle what I think is the biggest issue. And I think many of you have told me too, you feel is the biggest issue right now: affordability. So with that as our background, no, that's how we've set up the notice for the meeting notice for today. We're going to hear from the renowned Dr. Arthur Laffer from the Laffer Center. We're going to hear from Patrice. Oh, I'm going to mess up your name, Patrice, but I apologize in advance. Who's the director of the Independent Women's Research and Economic Opportunity group. We're going to hear instead of Chris Denson, who is sick, we're going to hear from Kyle Wingfield at the Georgia Public Policy Foundation. And then at the end, we want to hear again your comments, as this will be one of the last meetings before we start running out the public ideas that we will present as a committee here at the end in December. So please pay attention today. Keep the thoughts of how we got here in mind, and let me know any ideas that you think you might want to share, and be ready to talk about those as we end up this afternoon. The plan is to try to do this meeting within 2 hours and get us out of here around 4 o'clock, just for planning purposes for the rest of you. And the first thing we've asked is there's been a lot of comments about how you take the state income tax to zero. I've not been shy about saying one of the ways I think we should do this is by looking at the tax credits we give out, roughly 30 billion in tax credits, yet bring in roughly 16 billion in personal income tax. So we asked the Department of Revenue to print out several reports, and I think those are going to be distributed to you now, that lay out those credits, those exemptions, whether they be income or sales tax, so that you have them, you can look through these too. I know they were already provided and available to you, but I want to make sure that you each have a hand copy. And we've asked staff if they don't mind passing those out. The sales and use tax exemptions. That's about 19 pages worth of exemptions there. The other document being passed out to you, the slightly bigger document, is the tax expenditure report for FY 26. It's 205 pages. But we went through and combed it down and tried to pull out some of the ones that were federal in nature, thanks to our friends at the Department of Revenue. So you'll see we were able to get it down to be roughly 169 pages.
These all state only.
State only. In our state tax expenditure report, yes, sir, that would be. You're also going to get a document that is 12 pages of specific income tax credits. And then a separate sheet of 2 Excel spreadsheet pages that will lay out tax credits that currently have a sunset, or some of those that don't, and it kind of goes into an explanation of why. Thank you. So all in all here, there's about 234 pages of credits or exemptions for your reading and perusal as we have this discussion. Remember, each dollar that we save there, we can use on the income tax should we wish to do so. And you've now got 234 pages, plus we can provide you with the 205 additional pages from the full tax expenditure report. Should you like to look at that, that'd be about 400 pages of credits if you'd like to go comb through those. Are there any questions about those right now, or what you've got? It's a lot to digest. Again, the total on it, I think, comes up to around $30 billion. So if you need some time to think through it, please feel free to contact me individually offline if you'd rather do it that way.
Is that 30 billion in which categories, Mr. Chair?
I'm gonna hit your mic so we can talk, get you up. I kid you not, Nan, you're, go ahead. There we go.
I was just asking the headline, the different categories that add up to.
Right, it would be income tax credits, income tax exemptions, sales tax credits, and sales tax exemptions. So roughly 30 billion you will never see that you allocate as a legislator. Simply, it never comes in.
It's a tax.
For
expenditure.
purposes of understanding how that relates to what we're doing, remember, the personal income tax only brings in $16 billion. Does that answer your question?
It does. That's a little bit over half of our budget, isn't it?
And it's also only half of the total number of credits. You'd be correct, Senator.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Chairman, you ready for a motion?
You want to move? Yes, sir, Senator. If you want to, this makes this easy. So we could possibly get this down to That'd be an interesting conversation. If there are no other questions, we're going to go a little bit out of order for the sake of our presenters. Patrice, I'm apologizing in advance, on WUCA with the Independent Women's Center for Opportunity, Economic Opportunity is going to be our first presenter just for the sake of time. And Patrice, thank you so much for being here this afternoon with us.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Thank you so much. Thank you to members of the committee for inviting me to come and speak and share my perspective representing the independent women. My name is Patrice Onwuka, and I'm the director, excuse me, of the Center for Economic Opportunity at Independent Women. We advance policies that enhance people's freedoms, opportunities, and well-being, with a special focus on women's opportunities and seeking ways to build security and prosperity. Independent Women has a strong grassroots presence right here in Georgia with over 400 active women. These are moms, business women, community leaders who are engaged on various issues here. Our women care about fiscal sanity, fiscal security, and growing an economy. They support policies that achieve these goals, including lifting the tax burdens on individuals, families, and small businesses. So we see eliminating the state income tax uniquely benefiting women by first providing a cushion against rising prices, by removing the penalty against hard work and success, by increasing access to capital for startups, and building financial security for the future. I'll talk briefly about each of these as I go along. You've very well laid out, sir, what's going on here in Georgia, and certainly the competitiveness compared to other states, why this revolution in taxes is really important. But I'll say why, from a women's perspective, we think that this is really going to be great for this economy, particularly the women in it. Women will benefit tremendously from the income tax elimination. We are a powerful economic agent as consumers, producers, and investors. We comprise over 48% of the Georgia workforce, and we're breadwinners in about 40% of households here. Our women's earnings increase, obviously their tax burdens do, and so women are very sensitive to tax policy. Now, number one, eliminating the income tax empowers women to cope with today's affordability crisis. We have been hearing that A word quite often lately, affordability, and it's important. Increased take-home pay provides an important cushion against rising prices, and women are overwhelmingly driving the spending and investing decisions in their households. According to one analysis, women control or influence a staggering 85% of consumer spending. So we are acutely aware of the rising cost of living right now. Now, Georgia ranks among the top 20 most expensive states for single adults. And of course, we understand that prices have risen over 20% thanks to the inflation over the past 4 years. Now we're seeing, obviously, inflation falling from those generational highs, but inflation remains on those essential items like gas and food. We've got skyrocketing housing costs and relatively stagnant wages. So really, households are left with an effective pay cut. Add to that the rising interest rates that have made everything, particularly debt, more expensive. And so virtually everyone has to prioritize how to spend their limited income and make those trade-offs. Let me focus on poor and working families for just a moment here. These poor and working families spend disproportionately more of their incomes on essential items like food and energy than higher income or households, not surprisingly. Very often, and I focus on this research in my work, a lot of families are facing a heat or eat dilemma where they're choosing between utility bills versus buying food or medicine and shelter. Families typically use these extra funds from income taxes in lots of different ways, including increasing their personal consumption, like spending, or paying down debt and boosting their savings. And we know that people are living paycheck to paycheck right now. 52% of Georgians are living paycheck to paycheck, according to a 2024 Financial Industry Regulatory Authority study. And this is far above the national average. So first off, we see that eliminating the state income tax would be an immediate boost in take-home pay that would give women the ability to purchase the essentials that they need and increase their discretionary spending. That means low-income households are not making as many trade-offs, those heat or eat decisions. Middle-class families are catching up on bills and enjoying the activities that they couldn't afford before. Families dining out, kids registering in sports. I've got 3 boys, so I know that well. Being able to, go on trips and attractions. Simply put, lowering income taxes increases consumer spending and fostering business growth. Number 2, zeroing out the state income tax will strengthen women's financial security for the future. So with budgets already tight for many Georgians, saving for an emergency for the future is increasingly difficult. We understand that people don't have that rainy day fund that very often is needed, even 3 months of income, for example. And so, the recent federal shutdown has proven that that loss of income or benefits can occur at any moment. But eliminating the income tax allows citizens to build up their savings for that unexpected period of income and loss. And now, more than just saving for right now, they're saving for the future. Women, we know, live longer than men, and they also tend to have less accumulated wealth for retirement because of lower earnings over time, and sometimes because we take time out of the workforce. So the challenge of having enough financial resources to provide that economic security in your later years and ensuring your dignity in your later years can be mitigated by increasing the income and the take-home pay that you have during those critical working years. Number 3, ending the income tax eliminates the penalty for hard work and success. When workers increase their pay by working more hours, working multiple jobs, or being rewarded for excellence on the job through pay increases and bonuses, they lose some of that to taxes, income taxes. This makes the effort of working less profitable and less worthwhile. Now, we know that women tend to be flexibility maximizers. So they seek work arrangements that maximize their ability to work around priorities such as caring for aging parents or children, for taking care of their own health issues. And consequently, women actually hold more multiple jobs than men. They tend to be part-time and full-time, or 2 part-time jobs that they're cobbling together. Some 4.3 million women, in fact, nationwide hold more than 1 job, and that's more than men. And so, currently Georgia's labor force participation rate is about 60%. We want to see that increase. And historically, married women work less when household taxes rise. Well, if we want working married women who want the opportunity to work, the choice to work if they so choose, then removing that tax penalty is a great way to stimulate women's labor force participation. And finally, eliminating the state income tax helps women build the capital to start and grow their businesses. And this one I love. This is dear to my heart. Female entrepreneurs are thriving locally despite lots of headwinds. We have something like 12 million female-owned businesses nationwide. Right here in Georgia, 452,000 women own small businesses in this state. Georgia ranks number 2 behind Florida in the nation for the number of women-owned firms. But it has the highest ratio of women to men-owned small businesses. Atlanta ranks number 2 behind Miami for the city with the most female-owned businesses. Atlanta underpins the regional growth of small businesses in the Southeast that continues to create opportunities for women. So Georgia's doing well, but you could be doing more to spur female enterprises. The economic challenges that women entrepreneurs face may be similar to men. Labor shortages, not surprisingly, inflation, regulations, taxes, and an uncertain economic condition. However, there are a few challenges that are unique to women-owned businesses. Their average revenues are rising, but still remain behind firms owned by men. And most importantly, women often talk about the lack of access to capital. It's a perennial issue. In fact, in 2022, female-founded companies garnered just 2% of all the total capital invested by venture-backed companies and startups. Men tend to start their businesses with 6 times as much capital, 6 times. About half of women business owners in one survey said it was just a lack of funds that was their toughest startup challenge. And of those, over half pointed to high startup costs. Well, Women also tend to self-fund their businesses. And so with less access to capital, they depend on their incomes to fund their startups, making tax policy really important. By eliminating the income tax, female small business owners can keep more of their earnings to start and reinvest in their businesses, which would allow entrepreneurs to gain new capital and really fund their dreams. So to wrap up here, eliminating Georgia's income tax is a win-win-win for women, families, and businesses. It'll catapult the state ahead of Florida, for example. Policymakers in Washington, D.C. have already delivered historic tax cuts this year with a vast majority of voters across party lines that we polled earlier this year supporting income tax reductions. Now, Georgia has the chance to build on this tremendous effort by accelerating the end of the state income tax to free Georgian women to thrive, succeed, and secure a bright financial future. Thank you for your time.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Ms. Onwuka. I appreciate it.
You
I got
got
it right that time.
You got
Hold on a
it.
second. Thanks for being here. I want to ask first, is there any questions from any of the members of the committee? I got one for you. I
Yes.
see somebody else might have one first. Senator Warwick, did you have a question?
Thank you for being with us today
Thank
and
you.
your presentation. Have you taken into account the impact? You think Georgians would rather pay higher sales tax than they're paying now?
Well, I think Georgians would love the income tax reduction that frees up their income to determine where they want to spend their money, and whatever that ends up being on, that would get to be their choice.
But you know, if the sales taxes are increased, which is what has happened in these other states that have taken this path to reduce the per capita income tax, then that's money out of your pocket, just coming out of the same pocket, going into it, but without increasing sales tax, how are we going to replace the revenues of this, of about 56% of our state revenues that we use to fund all of our state's needs?
Senator,
Yes.
before she answers that question, can I give the speaker a little bit of background context for that? Senator, do you mind Senator, there was a report that came out earlier today that said something to the effect of taking away Georgia's income tax would mean a tripling of the sales tax. Now, that report did not take into account at all any of the things that the committee has talked about concerning income tax credits, concerning growth, anything at all. In fact, all it did literally is play third grade math and walk and say, here's what the income tax is today. If I had to make it up on sales tax, here's what it would be. So I think that's the report that the senator is citing when she's asking you this question. I just wanted to make sure you had that background context for your answer, as I know that you may have not seen that report.
Well, thank you. I had not seen that report. It is helpful to understand. And it sounds like the committee has not landed on any particular course of action, including the fact that there are a number of tax credits and deductions, exemptions that could be eliminated in lieu of a sales tax. And when you look at some of the other states, I mean, you don't have to increase a sweeping sales tax. You can target particular types of things. And so, you know, I absolutely want families to see their increased take-home pay, because that's actually about giving them more control over how they get to spend their money and where they spend their dollars. But thank you.
I'm sorry, did you say it gives them more control?
Being able
out
to-
of sales tax?
Yeah, Senator, I would think, no, I didn't say a sales tax. I'm talking about reducing the income tax.
But
Should I restate what I said?
well, there are a limited number of places you can go to replace that, but that is, you understand that the personal income tax revenue is 56% of our total annual state budget. That's a lot of money, and we have to replace it or cut expenditures.
I understand your question and your point, and I think it's really interesting that there's over at least $30 billion, as the information you just provided was, that the committee can look to. And so I just want to be clear that I fully support returning to the hardworking men and women of this state their own money to determine how best to spend it. And that is cutting the income tax. That's what I'm talking about.
That's right, and that's proven to be, and I'll provide some information on that further, but that's proven to get states, the 9 states that have moved in that direction. Iowa, for example, is in total fiscal crisis with a deficit, running on a deficit.
Are you referring to the state of Florida?
No, I said Iowa.
Oh, Iowa. I mean, you can look at lots of different states and how they've attacked this problem, including those that are working towards eliminating it. I think it's great to be innovative and look at all the ideas on the table rather than settling on one particular way forward first. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I have a couple of questions if you don't mind. The first is, you've been able to look at this as a 50-state move. Do you know of any state that's already eliminated the state income tax that's now trying to create one?
No, that would be reverse progress, I would think. I mean, I think we've seen states moving in the other direction of eliminating their state income taxes and using the triggers, which really ensures that there's kind of a security for the budgets to ensure that there's either enough growth or other revenue sources before cutting it down to and eliminating them in total.
Ms. Onwuka, you've also talked, the evidence you've talked about and the statistics you provided, we've heard them anecdotally about population as a whole. You've targeted down as to how they affect women. It sounds like the effect that we're hearing on the population as a whole is also reflected among women. Women aren't treated worse by any means by eliminating the income tax. Would that be a fair summary?
That's
What
a
you said?
very fair summary, sir. I mean, when you consider that women are making a lion's share of the spending decisions in their households, they understand where the revenue is and how increasing the take-home pay allows them to make more decisions about their discretionary income. And that is from, the basic essentials to the more discretionary things like family budgets, dining out. And obviously those have a rippling impact across the rest of the economy. When you're able to have more family nights out at the pizza shop, that pizza owner can expect to see more foot traffic and can hire new people. So absolutely, women are not treated less. They are actually well taken care of, and it respects their choices in the workforce and actually increases their labor force participation.
I caught your statistic that 52% of individuals are living paycheck to paycheck. Is that nationwide or is that Georgia specific? I want to make sure I wrote that down correctly.
You are correct. Let me just pull it up here. Yes, currently 52% of Georgians live paycheck to paycheck, according to a 2024 study from the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, or FINRA. Happy to provide that report to you as well.
Thanks. And wow, it's a sobering statistic. I caught your other statistic, 400,000 female-owned small businesses in Georgia and Atlanta ranking number 2. You said Miami is number 1. Is there anything that Florida has done specifically or Miami specifically that has caused them to be, I mean, I guess we got to say, heck, it's pretty good that we're number 2 with some of the headwinds we face with income tax. But are you seeing anything else or data that you see from other states that are policies that we potentially could adopt that would help female owned and female run businesses relocate to Georgia?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I mean, I think for Miami, I'm going to suspect that it has to do with the population of immigrant women, Hispanic women who love to start businesses, recognizing that, they want to have a family, but still want to provide income to their families. So, small businesses and particularly women-owned businesses, they struggle with a lot of issues that male-owned businesses struggle with, like taxes and regulation. So obviously deregulation is important. Deregulation in, the home-based businesses, deregulation in the, when you're looking at licensing, for example, in a lot of occupations that require, ridiculous numbers of hours and time getting training for something that has nothing to do with safety or the actual importance of the occupation itself. So the deregulation, the tax aspect of it, and obviously just I think there's the ability to be able to self-fund yourself or fund yourself through your family. And so if your family has more income coming in, your distant relatives have more income that they're keeping of theirs, that's money that can be pooled together to start a small business and keep that money growing and circulating in the local economy and building up those women-owned businesses.
So Georgia's number 2 in total female-owned business.
Yes.
Not okay. So per capita, then we're going to be soaring over Florida, I would imagine.
I didn't do per capita, but probably yes.
Gotcha. Thank you. You've answered most of my questions. Has that sparked any other questions from members of the committee? Don't think we have any other questions for you right now. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for your testimony and how what our changes would relate specifically to women.
Thank you so much, Chairman. Thank you to the members of the committee.
Thanks. Our next presentation, we might have to take 1 minute to allow our next presentation to set up. I think it's going to be via Zoom, so I'm going to pause for 1 second. If you need to run to the restroom, now's a really good time to do so.
Have you seen the plans for the East Wing or anything yet?
Yeah, well, just what's on television.
All righty. Thank you for that. We're back on, and I think our,
Yeah.
let's see here. We ready? The digital folks? Good deal. Our next presenter is someone who's known to many in this crowd already. Someone who's known across our country. Dr. Art Laffer, Arthur Laffer of the Laffer Center, is going to present to us next and talk a little bit about growth strategies and policies he's seen over his years and many experience in the economics field of what the elimination of the state income tax could look like or might look like should we pursue to take that option. Dr. Laffer, thank you so much for being here with the committee this afternoon.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to be with you. I love Georgia, by the way.
Well, that's good. We do too. So we appreciate you being here, and the floor is yours. Thanks so much for being present.
Okay, well, I just thought what I'd do if this makes sense, and I don't know what the format is specifically. I've got about half an hour, I guess, and I'd like to talk to you about why I think it's so important to eliminate the income tax, number one. I want to talk about how to go about eliminating the income tax with specific reference to some of the attempts historically, and why it's important to get it to zero right away, if I can. And let me, if I can just start off with you, there are 11 states in the U.S. that have introduced an income tax since 1960. Those states are West Virginia, in 1961, Indiana in 1963, Michigan 1967, Nebraska 1968, Illinois 1969, Maine in 1969, Pennsylvania in 1971, Rhode Island in 1971, Ohio 1972, and New Jersey in 1976, and lastly, Connecticut in 1991. Now, there are 11 states that have introduced an income tax, and let me tell you what I've done with the data, if I can. I've looked at each of those states, and I've lined up the year in which they introduced the income tax, all right? So I've each state lined up from the year it introduced the income tax, and then what I have done is I've looked at the 5 years before each of those states introduced the income tax, and then I've looked at the most recent 5 years at total state and local tax revenues. All right, I've looked at it for population. I looked at it for gross state product. I've looked at it for gross state product and total revenues. Are you with me on this? Let me, if I again say it. I've lined up each one of these 11 states by the year in which they've introduced the income tax. So that's all there. Then I look at each of those states and say, what were they like 5 years ago before they introduced the tax? And what are they like presently? And I looked at the following measures. I've looked at population, gross state product, and total state and local tax revenues. You can look at lots of other things as well. Now, when I look at population, I look at the population of the state relative to the rest of the nation. In other words, to those 39 states that did not change their income tax status during this period. And I hope I'm making it, are all of you following what I'm doing here? I'm just looking at when they introduced the income tax, what were they like 5 years before they introduced it, and what they are like now, all relative to the rest of the nation. If you look at these states, every single one of these states, with regard to population, has declined relative to the rest of the nation. And not only has it declined, but it's declined by a huge, huge amount. For example, when West Virginia introduced its income tax in 1961, it was 1.5% of the U.S. Its population was. In 2023, its population was 0.7% of the U.S. It has declined relative to the rest of the nation by almost 56%. Indiana has gone from 3.8% of the U.S. down to 2.6%. It declined 31%. Michigan went from 6.3% to 3.8%. That's a 39% decline. Nebraska fell by 31%. Illinois fell by 41%. Maine by 28%. Pennsylvania 42%. Rhode Island by 38%. Ohio by 41% relative to the rest of the nation. New Jersey by 28%, and Connecticut by 23%. Each and every one of those states in population has had a cataclysmic decline relative to the rest of the nation. It's just amazing. If you look at gross state product, the same thing is true. West Virginia fell by 61% relative to the nation. Connecticut by 33%. New Jersey, 31%. Ohio, 49%, 44%. All of those in population. But not only did they decline in population cataclysmically, but also they declined in GSP and also in tax revenues. Every single one of those states that introduced an income tax has a decline relative to the rest of the nation in total state and local tax revenues. And some of them by a lot. For example, revenue in West Virginia went down by 53% total revenue. What I'm saying here is when a state introduces an income tax, it collapses before your very eyes. And what I'm saying from this as well is if you played the film backwards, if they were to get rid of their income tax, they could return back to the state they were prior to the putting in the income tax, which would be an enormous improvement. Number one is when you introduce an income tax in a state, the economy of that state literally collapses. Now, not only is it that the state collapses when you introduce an income tax, what I've also done is looked at the highest tax rate states in the nation, the 9 highest tax rate states in the nation, and I've compared them with, now this is all state taxes, I've compared them with the 9 zero income tax rate states. Those 0 income tax rate states are Florida, Nevada, New Hampshire, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, and Washington State. I've done that. I've eliminated Wyoming and Alaska because they're such heavily oil states, but it doesn't matter. If I included them, it wouldn't matter either. What you can see here is that the 9 states from the period 2012 through 2022, all right, the 9 states average income tax of the 0 tax states is 0%, obviously. For the 9 states with the highest income tax, their average highest marginal tax rate is 11%, 11.2%. The average for the nation is 4.7%. Looking at population growth, all right, the 9 states population grew by 11.8% during that period. For the average of the nation, 5.9%. And for the highest tax rate states, 4.6%. Just straight out. Domestic migration, the same thing. Employment, 16% growth in employment in the 0 income tax states. The 50 states, 10% growth in employment. For the highest tax rate states, 8.4% growth in employment. Personal income growth, tax revenues. And I'm just going to go to tax revenues. Gross state products, it's the same thing, by the way. In tax revenues, the growth in tax revenues by the 9 0 income tax rate state was 41%. For the 50 states, it was 34%. And for the highest tax rate states, 38%. What I'm telling you here is the evidence is incontrovertible that the income tax in a state is a killer. If you look at the states here again, it's just unambiguous. And I could take you through all sorts of other statistics, but I don't think that's what you want for the rest of today. I'm going to also just take you through one other thing. In 1950, the 9 0, yes, sir.
Guys, can I get you to repeat the tax revenue numbers? I got the 9 lowest at 41%.
I can send this to you, by the way. For the 9 lowest, the growth in tax revenues was 41% from 2010 to 2020.
Got it.
All right.
And then
for
the
the 9 highest tax rate states, it was 38%.
Got it.
And for the nation as a whole, it was 34%.
34. Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
So in other words, you know, the highest tax rate states don't even keep up in tax revenue growth. You know, the states that introduce income taxes collapse in every category, including tax revenue. I mean, they just are failures there. In 1950, the 9 0 earned income tax rate states, today's 9 or 0 income tax rate states, were a little bit more than 10% of total personal income of the U.S. in 1950. Today, they're about 21%, a little bit over 21% of total personal income. In 1950, the 11 states that introduced an income tax since 1960, the 11 states were 35% of total national personal income. Today, they're a little under 21%. Is there? You know, what I'm saying is that here you've got a policy that is like a nuclear weapon that has been done. What I would suggest to the state of Georgia is that you can get rid of your income tax. You would be very well served with regard to economic growth. Now, the problem you have with getting rid of your income tax is twofold. Number one, it's very hard for politicians and budget people to understand what type of economic growth and what type of revenue numbers really will follow. It's really hard to understand. I was presenting these data to Jay Nixon in Missouri quite a while ago, and he asked me to come in, Democratic governor of Missouri. He had his chief of staff there and his budget director. And I went through all of these numbers with him, and he said, you know, Dr. Laffer, I love what you're saying. It makes perfect sense to me. I'm not an economist. I can't judge the numbers themselves, but you know, I've got 2 more years left in my term in office. I know I can muddle through. And if we got rid of the income tax here in Missouri, I have no idea that this would happen. It scares me to death. I just can't feel comfortable that I could muddle through and make it. And, you know, I understood his complaint and his situation because the most important part of getting rid of an income tax is the last 1%. If you have a 9% income tax, the benefits from dropping it from 9% to 1% are probably smaller than the benefits of dropping it from 1% to 0%. Getting rid of an income tax and not having to file, not having to have the lawyers, accountants, deferred income specialists, the favor grabbers, all of that. So the real problem comes is how do you get rid of an income tax? Phasing it out over a number of years. I did that for Fife-Symington in Arizona. We were on the path of getting rid of Arizona's income tax. I think it was 1991 to 1996. We'd cut the highest rate from 8% to 4%. We were just coming through to do the last few years. Fife was indicted. He was convicted. That stopped the whole process of getting rid of it, and it stopped dead in its tracks. What you have to do is figure out a way of how to get rid of the income tax without having a panic about the loss of revenues. And let me tell you what I've just done for Kehoe, for Governor Kehoe in Missouri, is what I've done is a plan for him, how they can get rid of the income tax. What I did was, and I can send you all these papers, by the way, so you don't have to memorize them and write them all down. But what I did, I took the Missouri sales tax, which is a catastrophic thing. In Missouri, there are about 2,339 separate sales tax jurisdictions. Their taxes range from 5.5% to 12%. By the way, 2,339 separate sales tax jurisdictions on a population of 6 million makes about 3,000 people on average for a sales tax jurisdiction. There are upwards of 7 or 8 separate taxes in each of these jurisdictions. The average is 4.7. There are 15 separate categories of products that fit with the sales tax, and there are 3 separate categories of purchasers with regard to their sales tax. So what I did was I took Missouri sales tax and I got rid of all, this is conceptual, I got rid of all of the sales tax expenditures. All right? I got rid of all their tax expenditures and I got the whole broadest base tax and said, how far down could I cut the tax rate in Missouri to have a revenue neutral sales tax, only with the broadest possible sales tax base and the lowest possible tax rate. And then I took all of the revenues from the income tax, expected revenues, and folded the income tax into the state's sales tax. Now, by folding it into the state's sales tax on this broad base, the sales tax rate did not go up. It went down by a little bitty tiny bit. So in other words, you could collect all of the current sales taxes and income taxes if you had a comprehensive sales tax with no tax expenditures at a rate lower than the current sales tax rate in Missouri. My suggestion to the Missouri is what they do is they reconstruct their income tax by getting rid of it in its entirety and folding it in its entirety into the sales tax base. There would be no static revenue loss whatsoever. There would be no fears of school closings, libraries, etc., all of that stuff. None of that would happen. And that every year the economic growth above a certain amount they would use to reduce the sales tax rate. I know I'm being very short with you on this, but please, The worst thing in the states of a broad-based taxes are the income taxes. You can get rid of your income tax in 1 year if you fold your income tax into your sales tax and get rid of all of your sales tax expenditures. You really can do that, and that would incredibly jettison your economic growth. The people who would be upset by losing their sales tax exemptions are exactly those same people who would be most benefited by getting rid of the income tax. You could be able to do that really, I think, very well and get the income tax out immediately. That's number one proposal for you, and I know I'm going through it very quickly, but it's really important. And this is one
Now
you
slow
can
you
do.
down for a second, Dr. Laffer.
Of course you may.
Just want to make sure I understood exactly what you said. You were calling them sales tax expenditures. Here, I
That's a
think we call
deduction.
them
Yeah,
exemption, sales tax
exemption.
credit.
Exemptions, credits, whatever it is, all the things that make the sales tax base lower than it should be.
Just for your edification, we handed out those documents to the committee before you came on of roughly 200 plus pages of exemptions that Georgia Code already
Exactly.
has.
Yes, sir.
Want to make sure I understood what you said correctly, though. In Missouri, if
Yes.
you were to take and do away with the exemptions,
All of them, yep.
you actually would be able to do away with your income tax and lower your sales tax at the same time.
Sales tax rate, yes.
Sales tax rate.
In other
at
words, the
same time.
exemptions on the sales tax in Missouri cost you more static revenue than the whole income tax.
It is funny you should say that. When we totaled up the income tax and sales tax exemptions in Georgia, we got somewhere around $30 billion. Yet our income tax in total only brings in about $16.2 billion.
I
Would
rest my case.
that be something? Would that be
Yes.
something you is indicative in other cases?
No, that you're even more extreme than Missouri. That's exactly what I'm saying. Your sales tax exemptions cost you in revenues more than the income tax collects. So by getting rid of those exemptions, you're able to lower the sales tax rate by a lot more than you'd have to raise it by folding the income tax into this new comprehensive sales tax base. That
When
is
you do
exactly what I'm
are you-
saying.
Are you taking into account any type of growth at
Nope.
all when you're?
Nothing.
So
It's
it's
static.
gravy
It's
on the
all
top.
static. It's the anti-Laffer proposal. There is no growth in there. The Laffer curve is not at work. There is no dream. There's no hope. There's no something. This is strict accounting. Bam. And everyone in your state would know for well there is no chance of you losing revenues by folding in your income tax into a broadened sales tax base, period. And I didn't know your numbers like I do Missouri's, but your numbers make it even more extreme.
But the key is you have to take and have the discussion about exemptions and credits in order to make that work.
Oh, yeah, of course. You need a broader sales tax base to offset the revenue, the static revenue losses from the income tax elimination. But you need to
You
do
said
it.
we would have- Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. You are obviously very well versed in this topic. You said that we would have detractors, that there would be those who fight us in such a proposal.
Yeah,
What was your
every lawyer's firm in town would be against you because they don't pay sales taxes right now. I don't know. I think that's true in Georgia. I don't know if it is, but they don't pay sales taxes. So lawyers would love to have the sales taxes, except who are the people that are going to benefit most from getting rid of the income tax? The lawyers. So I'm joking with you a little bit, okay? Just smile a little bit, make me feel comfortable. So the lawyers would find it better off by having no income tax than they would being exempt from sales taxes. Most of the people who are exempt from sales taxes would be greatly benefited by no income tax.
So you think Shakespeare had it right there, Dr. Laffer. I got you on that quote. I understand. And then
Thanks.
the state of Georgia, when we started, we actually banned lawyers. So welcome back to.
Now, I've got
early
one
Georgia.
other thing I'd like to mention to you, if I may. I know I'm pushing onto my time on you, but I got one thing else I'd like to mention, and it's very important in Georgia and in all the states except for one, is you have a big property tax problem. We have probably the least one here in Tennessee, but I am working on an initiative here in property taxes in Tennessee. What you need to do is do something the way California did, which is Proposition 13, What you need to do is limit the growth in property taxes for any individual property. In California, they limit, in 1978, in June of 78, they passed something called Proposition 13, which limited property tax bills for any given property in any 1 year can never exceed 2%. Can never exceed 2%. So that means you don't have any static revenue losses by the property taxes, but the property tax bills for unimproved land, unimproved property can never increase by more than 2% per annum. If you do improve the property, the tax base of that property is by the market value of the improvement. And that's what they did in California. They did two other things as well. One is they limited effective property tax rates to not exceed 1% of market value. They did that, and they also made a supermajority requirement for anyone to increase taxes in California. But those two reforms would skyrocket your economic growth. I would be more than happy to work with any of you on the details of this plan, but property taxes and income taxes are your killers. And I've worked with Georgia. I don't remember what it was, but it was your program about 10 or 15 years ago. And I forget what the Speaker of the House's name was who did that plan. But you could really do it. You could do it in one term, in one legislation, get rid of your income tax and freeze your property tax rates by growing no more than 2% per annum. And you wouldn't believe what would happen to Georgia. Florida wouldn't have a chance. Everyone in Florida would move to Georgia. Not that you want everyone there, by the way.
Don't
But
convince us not to do it there, Dr. Laffer. I mean,
yeah, I'm sorry. Usually they hate people like me from California. So I was hoping you'd like Floridians, but hey.
I want to make sure that you said you had two proposals. It was the
Those are
income
the
tax
two.
and the
Property
the proper-
tax limitation and folding your income tax into your sales tax. Those are the two things I'd do if I were Georgia, if I wanted to skyrocket. Now, there are lots of other things I could talk to you about, but you gave me half an hour, 15 minutes talking, and those are the two you can do, and you can do them, and they're really easily doable. They've been done before, and you can really make Georgia a very prosperous growth state.
Thank you. Let me see if there's any questions from the members of the committee before I ask you a few more, if you don't mind, Dr. Laffer.
Sure.
Any committee? Our majority leader, Senator Anna Vitarte.
Hey, Dr. Lafton, let's test your history, nuts and bolts. Isn't it true that Proposition 13 is one of the main reasons why Ronald Reagan swept to electoral victory back in 1980 because of the similar economic environment situation we find ourselves in today?
Yeah, in fact, as governor of the state of California, he raised property taxes just as governor. But after Prop 13 passed, he saw the light in June of 1978 and went for the big tax rate reductions that swept him into victory in 1980 and then really launched him in 1984. We won 49 out of 50 states. I was on the executive committee of the Reagan-Bush Finance Committee. I mean, it was just a beauty to behold. Politically, it is huge. Let me just take you on Prop 13 if I can for 1 second. Now, remember, this was in June of 1978. At that time, the effective tax rate on property in California was 2.7%. They limited the growth to 2% per annum, and they lowered the tax rate from 2.7% to 1%. That was a 60% cut in property tax rates in 1 minute. Bang, done. All right. That state, California, in the next 10 years, property values, which were approximately equal to the national average, went to double the national average. California grew by a Massachusetts over 10 years, by a San Francisco per year. We became the fastest growing state. Our unemployment rate went from 2.5%, 3% above the national average to below the national average. And prosperity was everywhere in that state. Prop 13 really worked miracles. And you know, it's just, they're very easy to do. And that is why state government was put into effect back in the 19th century, was to oversee property taxes done by cities, counties, and local districts. And you have the full authority to be able to do that, to limit these taxes. And that's why you were put into places to be the umpire, the referee for state and local government, for cities, counties, and local districts.
Thank you for that assessment. Not to, totally get my age, but that was the month I was born. So I guess life has gone full circle.
You know why I hate you now?
Well, Dr. Laffer, I think it also would be
Thank
prudent
you.
for us to tell you, the Senate passed a bill that did that, almost exactly what you said in 2024. We were required though to put an opt-out clause in that allowed local governments to opt out in order for it to pass the entire General Assembly. So that's the position that we find ourselves under right now. It sounds like you're saying we possibly should revisit that opt-out procedure.
Oh, you definitely should. And let me tell you the politics. And I know you guys don't care about the politics at all, but let me tell you what the politics were in June of 1978. When that proposition was put on the ballot, it's a constitutional amendment. It was put on by Howard Jarvis and Paul Gann. I was the primary spokesman at the time for it in California, all right? And it was opposed by the Democratic Party, but it was also opposed completely by the Republican Party. All the state unions went against it. All of them did, both state unions and other unions. The Small Business Federation went against it. The Roundtable in California went against it. All mature, reasonable, credible, good, honest, solid citizens went against it, with one small exception, the electorate. We won the election 65-35 and just wiped the opposition out. And then the voters turned around and killed everyone in the state who had opposed Proposition 13. And it worked just miracles for the state. So if you're looking at the way to win elections, anyone running on limiting property taxes and property tax bill increases has got a huge leg up on anyone else. And by the way, it's way popular amongst Democrats as well as Republicans to this very day. I've got a lot of literature on this, and I'm just summarizing it very quickly with you. If any of you are interested, I'd love to go through it in great detail with you, exactly how to do it and calculate it and do it.
Thanks. Any questions, any other questions from members of the committee? Senator Watson.
I have a microphone, Mr. Chairman, but just curious how. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just curious on your proposal, you were talking about Missouri. How was agriculture treated in the state of Missouri on the elimination of the sales tax and putting sales tax back on? How did you treat agriculture from that standpoint?
No, we treated agriculture the same way we treat every other industry in the state of Missouri. Although intermediate products, we still kept no sales tax. In other words, if you were going to tax food, tractors and things like that are used in the production of it were considered intermediate products. And therefore, we did not eliminate the exemption on sales tax for those going through.
So similar to what we do on what's called a
Yeah,
gate card.
yeah, exactly what you do. I think what I remember in your state when I did that big study 10, 15 years ago was you have intermediate products are exempt from sales tax, as they should be. Diesel fuel, for example, and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions from any other members of the committee? Senator Walker.
Dr. Laffer, Senator Walker here. How are you today?
I am doing very well, thank you.
Been with us. One thing you said gravely concerns me. I believe it may be related to Missouri. You said one of the leaders in eliminating the income tax, maybe it was another state, got indicted. And I certainly don't want to see here.
For a totally unrelated thing, Fife Symington was the governor of Arizona, very dear friend of mine before he ran for governor. He ran for governor. He was a builder, and he had raised funds for his investment fund in building buildings. And he had reported to the banks a financial statement and reported to his clients the financial statement. It was the exact same charges that were brought against President Trump in New York State by Gurnian. And he was indicted just the same way Trump was and convicted, and then was later pardoned by Bill Clinton. Fife Symington was, and then his indictment was overturned, his conviction was overturned. But it stopped our movement cold dead in its tracks. We just did 5 years worth of tax reform. If he'd have finished his term, we would have gotten rid of the income tax. But the reason I use that example is doing it piecemeal is deadly. Always something comes up and stops you. And you need to do it in one bill. You get rid of the income tax once and for all, and don't do it like these other 25 states that are, we're going to get rid of it over the next 60 years. That ain't going to happen. Getting rid of the last percentage on the income tax is way more important than all the rest of the income tax. Not having to file is the key.
So more of a serious question. I'd be curious, and I'm sure that we can get this answer, but folks that might oppose eliminating the state income tax would possibly be people and replacing it with a sales tax with fewer exemptions to fold it into the sales tax, as you say. A lot of Georgians don't pay any state income tax. Quite a large percentage, I would think, do not pay any sales tax, any income tax. So I don't know that they would necessarily favor paying higher sales tax. And then the other question is, in Missouri, along the same lines, we don't tax services. We don't put a sales tax on services. We don't put a sales tax on groceries. We don't put a sales tax on energy used in manufacturing. As the chairman already said, I mean, we have 300 or 400 pages of list of items that we don't, we exempt from sales tax, or we credit sales tax, or have a state income tax credit or exemption. So I think the politics of this is, as you probably have found in other states, and certainly sounds like you found in California, is difficult because there's a lot of entrenched special interest everywhere you look. And then so many Georgians don't pay any state income tax at all.
Yeah.
So what's your comment on that, I
Yeah.
guess?
Let me say that with those Georgians who don't pay income tax, would they be happy if they were made to pay an income tax?
Well, no, I don't think they would be
Okay, well,
happy.
I think that's the right answer. That's the answer I was hoping I'd get right away. Imagine how happy those who pay the income tax would be now if they didn't have to pay it. So the people who don't pay an income tax right now will be neutral. The people who pay an income tax right now would be ecstatic for getting rid of it. Now you look at the sales tax. Most of those people who pay the sales taxes are those people who buy products in the marketplace. They're not service providers and that type of stuff. They are. So if you were able to lower your sales tax rate, I would guess that your people paying normal, lower income people, the voters and stuff, and that would be much happier with a lower rate. Even though those people who had exemptions, especially services, would be unhappy at losing their exemption, but they're the exact same people who would benefit the most from getting rid of the income tax. So I think you've really got a win-win situation. And those people who do the services really have a very, very great ability to expand their income substantially, which they would do if the income tax were eliminated. You know, when you look at two locations, let me just get location A and location B. Let's imagine we raise taxes in A and we lower taxes in B. Producers and manufacturers are going to move from A to B. That is what's happening in Georgia. You can make your state a lot more attractive, and by lowering the taxes in Georgia, you'll attract a lot of jobs that you otherwise wouldn't have had. And you can be like California with Prop 13 and have your unemployment rate go, California was out of line, but we had go by from 2.5% above the national average to below the national average in a year. Bang! All those jobs came whimpering in right away. And the response, the supply side responses were extraordinary. If you go to California today, you wonder why it's not West Virginia. And the only reason it's not West Virginia is because of its property tax, but lowest property tax rate in the nation. The whole society in California thrives on the blowhole that goes through the ice crust of that property tax limitation. And if you look at all the advantages we have on property taxes, it's amazing. And California thrives on that. You drive down the coast of California and you don't see a poverty-stricken place. You see an amazingly prosperous place, even in spite of their 9+% income tax. It's because they have very low property taxes and very high priced homes, which people who own them love.
Any questions from any other members of the committee? Like, I'm gonna go with Nan and then come back to you, Senator Orrick.
Thank you for being with us, Dr. Lafler.
My pleasure.
You know, when we look at our state, we are actually outperforming a number of those states that you've listed as those who are eliminating personal income tax. We have a AAA bond rating from all three of the major rating agencies. Our economy outperforms most of the states without income taxes. In 2024, the last numbers showed that we're earning a higher median income as Georgia residents compared to Florida, Tennessee, Texas, South Dakota, Wyoming. And we've surpassed most of the states without income taxes in labor productivity, growing at a faster rate than several states: Alaska, Florida, Nevada, South Dakota, Wyoming. So these are trends. This is real data from the real world here in
Yep.
Georgia. And the concern that I hear from many is if we do away with this income tax revenue, our fiscal outlook could turn upside down. And we've been in the situation just as across the nation in the 2008 Great Recession, almost a depression. In that situation, you want a stable revenue flow, do you not? Sales tax is not a stable revenue flow because when folks are challenged to meet all their financial obligations, their purchasing goes down, and the sales tax revenue goes down. That revenue from personal income tax is more stable. So those are real concerns, I think, that have to be addressed as we look at these issues. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I do, of course. But for the stability of the sales tax or the income tax in the income tax in Georgia, just remember that by having stable income tax revenues during good times and bad times means that your citizens, the people who you're governing and who you're worried about most, are having more difficulty because of the stability. In other words, you don't want to balance the state budget by unbalancing the budgets of the citizens of the state. You really don't. Now, when you talk about the fiscal outlook on getting rid of the income tax, which is a correct statement there, that's why I had it offset 100% by the sales tax, is so that there would need no net revenue loss whatsoever. Now, the last thing I can say on your comments, you live in a wonderful state. I hope I was flattering and honestly flattering Georgia when I opened up. You are not some of the problem states in this nation. When I look at some of the problem states like Connecticut, New Jersey, West Virginia, some of these other states, Maine, Vermont, Rhode Island, and, that have high taxes, have introduced the income tax, you can preempt these problems and by making it so that you don't ever fall back into a downturn. There's no reason why. There are times when smokers don't get lung cancer, but even if you don't have lung cancer and even if you are a smoker, I think you're still better off not smoking.
Well, currently, are you aware that our effective state income tax rate is less than 3% of the total earnings of Georgians?
Yes, I am. I am
yeah,
aware it's low, and I'm also aware that it's everyone who pays it has to file a return, do all of that stuff. And even though the revenues are low, they all still have the horrible process of having to go through income taxes, filing them, and doing all of that, which is absolutely horrible. Here in my home state of Tennessee, we don't even know there's an income tax because there's no income tax. We don't file, we don't do any of that stuff. It's really cool. We got rid of our death tax about 6, 7 years ago, 8 years ago. I pushed that through. I got flipped off by the chief of staff of the governor at the time, and we got rid of it. And, frankly, all the Tennesseans were moving to Florida because there's no death tax in Florida, or much lower death tax. And they all left Tennessee right as they got sick. So, what you want to do is preempt it in Georgia so you don't have a problem. And, it's really cool. Making money is a lot more fun with no income tax. And there are a lot of people who would love to be in Georgia who aren't Because
Well,
you have one, even if it's low, it's still a pain in the badidibus. If you remember what we use the
It-
badidibus as the north end
may
of a
not-
southbound horse, but
You may not realize that we have, up to $65,000 of retirement income for each person is, not taxed. And so when you lean in heavy on the sales tax side and increase the sales tax, that means the seniors are going to be some of the hardest hit people. Their pocketbook, their budget is going to be hit the hardest because whereas they're exempted, up to $65,000 of retirement income is exempted from taxes now, you would have them all paying jacked up sales taxes on every purchase that they make.
their
And
tax
that-
rate would not change on the sales tax. In fact, it would go down because you broadened the base so much. Now that's just again, let me make it say, when
Oh,
you folded
base.
it in, when
What
you
does that
fold the
mean?
income tax into the sales tax by expanding the coverage from services and other things. All right, what you do is you have a lower tax rate in the situation there. Now, let me just ask you a question. Let's just take $1 billion. Which would you rather do? Give that $1 billion to people who don't work or cut tax rates on people who do work? And you know, I don't know what to say to you about retirees' accounts, but frankly, there will be making static revenue changes will affect this group or that group or the other, but it'll create a political economy of growth where everyone's better off in very short order.
Well, I don't characterize seniors as people that don't work.
Well, they're not being paid, they're not earning that income by working.
But they've worked for a lifetime.
No,
It's
no, that's
called
different. They're not, if you raise their tax or lower their taxes, their benefit payments don't change. They're wonderful people. Don't get me wrong, please. I love teachers. I is one. And I've been one for all my life. I've been a professor. I love it, love it, love it. And I love retiring. And I love the benefits I get from TIAA, CREF. And I wish they weren't taxable. But don't for a moment think that reducing tax rates on my TIAA, CREF benefits makes me want to work more. Because it doesn't. I want to be retired.
Dr. Laverne, I want to make sure I clarify one comment, though. You were talking about by broadening the base, the sales tax rate charged is actually less,
Yes.
correct?
Yes. That's what you told me about the tax expenditures, as you said, are substantially larger than the income tax revenue. It's what you just told me. And that's what's true in Missouri too, by the way. But I don't know the details of the numbers in Georgia, but it wouldn't take me long to figure them out if you wanted me to.
Senator Work, I just wanted to clarify that comment. I don't want, did you have another question you wanted to ask?
Well, our income tax is so low that we're 7th in the nation out of 50 states.
Yes.
And with an economy that's been working. Instead of lowering the income tax rate, we could be investing and taking a pro-growth approach and filling the gaps that exist in our funding of education and healthcare and transportation.
You sure could. And by the way, it can't be 7 out of 50 because there are 9 states that don't have an income tax at all. So it's got to be at least more than 7 out of 50, but not to quibble on that. Yes, you can do that. And you can do it, by the way, by raising other taxes and doing it that way. And that's what you're suggesting is, but when you want to make the tax system efficient, when you want to make the tax system as pro-growth as you can possibly do it, the income tax is noted for being the single most deleterious tax for economic growth. It is on the margin. It's very highly sensitive to people who focus on taxes. And it really, if you look at the numbers I provided you with the 9 highest income tax rate states, the 9 lowest, and which ones grow, the difference growth, when you look at what happens to states when they introduce the income tax, how they fall right from the top, bam, right to the floor. This is the evidence. You know, if it were true that the income tax didn't affect growth, I wouldn't be here in front of you today. But the income tax is the single biggest major tax killer of growth. And it really is a killer for all states, for all times. It really has. You can go back and get my book called The Wealth of States, which was published in 2014. And if you look at that, that's a 50,000 foot view, New York Times bestseller, by the way. We looked at all 50 states. We compared Texas with California. We compared Florida with New York. We compared Tennessee with Kentucky. We compared New Hampshire with Vermont. We did all the states together to really come to get our arms around the trunk of the tree. Was which tax of all the taxes does the most damage? And that is the income tax. Believe me when I tell you that. Statistically, it is a killer. Now, you have a low income tax in Georgia. You're a very well-run state, and I'm not here to criticize your wonderful state. I'm really not. But you can make it better. You can make it a lot better by just getting rid of that damn income tax and putting in a low-rate, broad-based, flat tax, sales tax. And it's amazing how that would really change things. And I'd be happy to come down and show you the numbers and show you how it works if you'd like me to.
Well, when it's burdening our seniors the way it would.
No one wants to burden them. Pay them more.
To go through sales tax increases. And you'd probably be interested to know that in one of the latest polls that our major newspaper here has published about what are the top issues facing our state, 8% of Republicans think that taxes are the #1 issue in Georgia. 2% of Democrats think taxes are the #1 issue. So it does not rise to the attention of our taxpayers and our citizens of Georgia out of the single digits.
I don't think you're right.
I'm not, that's not my numbers. That's the numbers that.
I don't care whose numbers I didn't mean to criticize the calculations of those numbers. All I can tell you is what happened in California with Democrats, Republicans, everything swept the place with property tax limitation, and it didn't cost a penny. It doesn't have to cost a penny. It did in California, but if you just put a limit on the growth of property tax bills to 2% for unimproved properties, you would not cost any revenues at all. And believe me, the people who supported that would landslide the state. Look at property tax limitations and see how many of your citizens would like property tax limitations. And I think you're going to find a large number of them if you do some serious polling.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you on that.
Dr. Laffer, thank you a ton. We've gone well over our time that you graciously allotted for us. I appreciate your comments and for bringing your years and decades of study to this committee. I'm sure we will be in touch further. Thank you for being present here with us today.
I'm here anytime you want me. I love the state, and go get them.
I thought you were about to say go Vols for a second.
No,
We're
I
gonna have
wasn't
to
going to say, I would have said go Vols, but I thought that wouldn't probably be
I caught it on
appropriate in
your
this
tongue.
moment. Thanks,
So much for-
everybody. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Our next presentation will come from the Georgia Public Policy Foundation, someone who is known to this group, Kyle Wingfield. Kyle, at the past life, was a columnist for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He now is I'm going to get your title wrong, Kyle. I think it's president of the Georgia Public Policy Foundation, correct? We got him muted. Is he on? Can you hear us, Kyle?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Got you now. Thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. And I know the hour is late, and I will try to be brief this afternoon, but I do want to take a moment to apologize for being a little underdressed. I'm coming to you from Washington, D.C., where I'm in town for an event, and it was either this shirt or a tuxedo. And while I normally err on the side of being overdressed, I thought that might be a little excessive in this case. So I'll beg the committee's indulgence for that this afternoon. Well, thank you. And I pinch hitting for my colleague Chris Denson here today, but talking about some things that we've written about a great deal, and want to emphasize first that we certainly agree that the discussion about lowering the income tax rate as far as possible and even to zero is exactly the conversation that we need to be having in Georgia. I think the property tax conversation can also be a very fruitful one as well. But focusing on the income tax today, two things that we were asked to go through. One of them is the concept of a taxpayer relief fund. This comes from the state of Iowa, which has been mentioned already today, and I will be happy to talk a little bit about how I think we may have a little bit of a positive difference here from Iowa. But you should have, I believe, in your packets an issue brief about the Taxpayers Relief Fund that we have put together. And quite simply, this is a tool for taking, in Georgia's case, some money we already have, the undesignated surplus in the state's accounts, which I want to remind everyone is the money that goes above and beyond the regular revenue shortfall reserve, above the lottery reserves, all those official reserve accounts. This goes above and beyond those. And I think as of the end of the previous fiscal year, there were about $9 billion in that fund. What we're talking about is taking some portion of that and some portion of future surpluses and setting them aside as a hedge against unanticipated revenue losses, so that you and your colleagues can cut income tax rates with even more confidence than you've had in recent years. Now, here's what I mean. You would have this money set aside. You would not budget for a deficit, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But you don't budget for a deficit. You still budget as fiscally conservatively as you have been doing in recent years. Budgeting for no more and perhaps even less money than the state expects to receive. And if there's a surprise on the downside, this money is set aside as a hedge to help make up for that surprise and cover some of the unanticipated shortfall that could happen. And that, as I said earlier, can give you more confidence in going ahead and cutting rates at a faster clip even than you've been doing in recent years. Now, I mentioned Iowa, and Iowa came up earlier. They're having a shortfall this year, and they're having to dip into this fund. Now, about 1/3 of the money that they're planning to dip into is for exactly the reason that I'm talking about here, which is they forecast a certain amount of revenue. It came in, actual revenues now coming in lower. And so this is the hedge to help make up the difference. The difference between what we're suggesting here and the way that they have done things in Iowa, they actually, 2/3 of their shortfall, they actually included in their budget. They planned to spend more money than they anticipated coming in. And that is not something that we would promote or advocate for in Georgia. We would not promote the idea of budgeting for a deficit and using this money to make up for it. The key to this working is to continue to set modest increases in the state budget and use the surplus, both the existing and future, to set aside in case of the unexpected downturns or the unexpected shortfalls. So that, in short, is what we're talking about with the Taxpayer Relief Fund. You can see on the second page of that one-pager, which I guess is a little bit of an oxymoron, but maybe it's just the backside, depending on how it's printed. The first few years that Iowa was cutting their tax rate, and they've cut it dramatically. When they started, it was almost 9%, and it is now below 4%. So they've cut it by more than half. And for the first 3 years that they were cutting, they were still putting an additional $1 billion or more per year into this taxpayer relief fund. So in some ways, they have prepared for this day that they're experiencing now, and they have some agriculture issues. They've got a number of things going on there. I'm not trying to only be critical of their approach here, but in many ways, these few years of setting money aside was what they were, it was preparing for this rainy day. And I believe this taxpayer relief fund in Iowa, certainly we would advocate for this in Georgia, is above and beyond their rainy day fund. So they have normal reserves to dip into, and they have this kind of reserve on top of it. That's what we would advocate for here in Georgia. I can go on to talk about triggers if you want me to do that, or if you want to pause, I'm happy to answer any questions about this particular item first.
Are there any questions from members of the committee for Mr. Wingfield about the taxpayer relief fund first? We've got a question you're going to have from Senator Harbison.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm trying to understand that what happens when there's a deficit as an hour and understand, is it true that our consistently run the deficit? And I thought I heard you say they can't plan for it. Did I understand that correctly?
Maybe there's a problem with the audio. That's not what I intended to say anyway. I don't believe it's true that they've consistently run a deficit. This year, the current year, they budgeted for a deficit and planned to take money out of their taxpayer relief fund to make up for it. And then in addition to that, their revenues came in even lower than anticipated. And so that's what is happening there. Our proposal here in Georgia is not to ever budget for a deficit. It's only to use this in the case of a shortfall that's unexpected.
Regarding our, if I may just ask another question, what was their previous, had an income tax, normal or no income tax? What was their situation and why did they try this formula?
So they had an income tax and still have an income tax. When they began these reforms, they had a series of tax brackets similar to the way Georgia did before our 2022 bill. The top rate, I believe, was 8.98%. What they have done is similar to us. They've gone to a flat tax rate for all taxpayers, and that flat rate is now down to 3.8%. So they still have an income tax. It's just the rate has been flattened and cut by more than half. And as you can see in the table on the one pager that should be in your packet, as they were cutting that rate, they were adding money to the taxpayer relief fund to the tune of about $1 billion per year.
Okay, and finally, can you explain me the rates as opposed to the rebates section of your presentation?
Yes. So similar to what Dr. Laffer was talking about, what you want to do with lowering the income tax rate is generate an economic response, a positive economic response. When you lower the rate and you do it on a permanent basis, you're telling business owners, you're telling entrepreneurs, you're telling households, your money is going to go farther in the future than it used to. And that's a powerful incentive for people to work more, to save more, and to invest more. And those three things are the lifeblood of our economy and the growth of our economy. When you give a rebate, that's a one-time transfer of money that was in the taxpayer's pocket, went to the government, and now is going back to the taxpayer. But it's just a one-time thing. And the way that rebates typically are done, you don't have to do anything for them. You've already done the thing that qualifies you for the rebate. So you're not creating an incentive in that case. So that section is really just meant to explain that changing the rate is a much more powerful economic tool than a one-time rebate.
And finally, how would you describe Georgia's tax system now? Is it saying what we're 5.1% or something to that effect? Plus, we're the number one state to do business, and we are growing, a great population growth and those kinds of things. How would you measure that as opposed to going to something that's new, that might be not necessarily foreign, but maybe a little untenable in the minds of some people who now see it as something they know and they can navigate? How would you describe that, if I may ask the question?
Yes, I appreciate the question very much. So similar to Dr. Laffer, and I'm a lifelong Georgian, so I'll say it even more strongly. I believe we have a tremendous state. We have a lot going right for us. This is not a matter of trying to fix something that's broken or rescue something that's failing. However, having said that, and one more point before I get to my however, we have one of the lowest tax revenues per capita of any state, and that is a good thing. However, you can always be better, and your neighbors are always trying to improve themselves, and future results don't necessarily follow what's happened in the past. If we want to make sure that our future is bright, we want to make sure that we're truly competitive, and we have to take note of what other states are doing around us. Now, it is a good thing that our tax burden overall is low, but how you raise the revenue does matter as well. And as Dr. Laffer said, the income tax is, I think, far and away the most economically destructive tax you can have, because it punishes work, it punishes savings, and it punishes investment. When you tax something, you get less of it. To grow our economy, we want more work, more savings, and more investment. So if we can shift the burden, or another approach is to slowly reduce this burden so that you don't have to shift it, and you keep that low level of taxation, but you're raising it in a more economically powerful way, then we'll be even better than we are today. But it's not a matter of there's something wrong with Georgia, we got to dig it out of pull it out of the ditch. We just want to turbocharge it so it's going even faster.
Any questions from any other members of the committee about the specific first part that he talked about, which is the taxpayer relief fund? Don't think you got any. You got Senator Walker.
And Kyle, you may not know this, or the chairman may know, but do you think it would require a constitutional amendment to establish this? And would we want to make it where it couldn't be rated for other things, and have it kind of dedicated type situation?
Yes, sir. That's a great question. So you can only protect this money. You would only be able to protect the money through a constitutional amendment. That is true. You could, through statute, set it up. Now, it would be subject to future legislatures making different decisions about the money, and that is a risk you run if you're not able to protect it constitutionally. There is a bill that the House, Chairman Blackman in the House introduced toward the end of this past session, that goes about it through an expansion of the rainy day fund and changing kind of some of the way it protects the existing rainy day fund amount, but it allows the expansion to be used as a taxpayer relief fund. So if you can't protect it constitutionally, you do have to find some kind of mechanism to make it work. That would be one example that we believe, if short of a constitutional amendment, could work pretty well. But you're right to observe that without that constitutional protection, it would be subject to future legislatures making different decisions about what to do with the money.
Sure.
But Kyle, if in your study of this issue and how other states have eliminated or reduced their state income tax, what's your feel, or what's the norm, or the most success, I guess, on making the corporate income tax in tandem with the personal income tax? We initially did not do that in Georgia, if you remember. But this last reduction, we did lower the corporate income tax, and just speak to that if you would, and your opinion on that, I guess, and what you've seen in the data.
Right. So, as you might expect, different states have approached this in very different ways. And many of the states that Dr. Laffer mentioned, or at least some of the states that Dr. Laffer mentioned that don't have personal income taxes do have corporate income taxes. Florida is an example of that. So we've seen different states try different things, and that's one great thing about our federalist system is that states can try what seems to make the most sense for their circumstances. North Carolina has actually gone even farther on the corporate side than it has on the individual side, and it's scheduled to continue lowering the individual rate, but to actually eliminate the corporate rate. So it's really just kind of a mixed bag out there in terms of what different states have tried. And I don't know that I have seen anything that is conclusive or definitive about what's necessarily the right way to approach those two, personal versus corporate. I think it's up to each state to decide for its situation what makes the most sense.
Thank you.
Senator O'Rourke.
Hi, good afternoon. Good to have you with us, even from afar, even. with
Thank you. I'll send you a picture later.
There we go. What I think a lot of people may not realize, and I'm sure you've come across this number, but in terms of our corporate income tax, tax savings from eliminating that corporate income tax would flow out of state overwhelmingly, like 94% of the tax savings would go to out-of-state corporations. And that's according to Georgia Department of Revenue reports that last year, most of Georgia's corporate taxable income was reported by corporations based out of state. So I'm not sure what are the pluses of granting that, eliminating the corporate income tax when overwhelmingly it's not Georgia corporations that are benefiting from it.
Well, if they're paying corporate income tax in Georgia, then they obviously have business operations here, and they are earning revenue and earning, they're making money here in the state of Georgia. And I think the way I would answer your question is that we would hope even more out-of-state corporations would come into Georgia and create even more jobs and do even more business here. That's part of growing the economy. And just as Coca-Cola and Home Depot don't only want to operate in Georgia, they want to operate in all 50 states and in some cases in other countries. That's just kind of a fact of life. We have companies headquartered in all sorts of places. We might see more companies choose to put their headquarters here. I think the story we would expect to see is that we would expect to see them contributing more to our economy if we have eliminated one of the disincentives for them to do that.
Well, there's certainly more than one way to look at that. A lot of the businesses get a major tax break now by paying taxes at the individual level rather than through the corporate income tax. So,
Well, I'm sorry.
If you don't
Sorry,
mind,
I didn't mean to interrupt. But I did want to say that that's one reason that we do favor the idea of having those rates set the same, so that the tax code is not incentivizing someone to file their taxes one way versus another. A business owner, through the individual code or the corporate code, let them make that decision for the appropriate business decisions and not for tax reasons.
Kyle, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to quickly get to your second point. We're
Yes.
We're running into a time issue here now.
I do understand. So the second thing I was asked to talk about, and this will go quicker because I have fewer details here, but is to talk about the concept of revenue triggers. And that is the idea that the state's revenues have to hit a certain point in order to trigger a further reduction in the income tax rate. So they have to grow before the income tax rate can go down anymore. That was part of the 2022 law that the General Assembly passed. In recent years, I think y'all have just gone ahead and done the rate and the rate decrease and even accelerated it each of the past couple of years because revenue growth was so strong. But this is a way to make sure that things don't kind of get away from you, right? And the state that I would point to here as probably the best example of that is North Carolina. North Carolina started cutting its personal income tax rate about a dozen years ago. When it began, it had multiple brackets, just like Georgia. Its top bracket was 7.75%. As things sit today, it has a flat rate of 3.99%, so it's fallen almost in half. And with the revenue triggers that are in place, would push its flat rate down to 2.49% by the end of this decade. Now, again, revenues and this is a little counterintuitive, revenues have to go up for the rate to continue going down. So if you don't believe that cutting tax rates is going to spur more growth, then this is a way to kind of, make sure that the proof ends up being in the pudding. And what we've seen from North Carolina, similar to what we've seen in Georgia, but for a longer period of time, is that even as they have lowered their rates, some people would say because they have lowered their rates, their revenues have continued to go up. The triggers that would push their rate from 3.99% to 2.49% do require continued growth over the next 5 years. And that growth averages to not quite 3% a year. So revenues have to go up by an average of about 3% a year in North Carolina to continue pushing that rate down. And what that really just speaks to is that giving people incentives, better incentives to work, save, and invest, spur more people who are already in your state to do more of those things. And it spurs people from outside the state to come to your state and do those things. So we've seen Georgia's population growing. That's one reason that our revenues continue to grow even as our rate goes down. And so if you can accelerate that even further, you would expect that growth to accelerate as well.
Thanks for your comments and explaining the trigger mechanisms, Kyle. I think we're aware of that. Obviously, we put those in the first bill that we did to drop the income tax here by 15% in Georgia. So thank you. Any questions
Exactly.
from members of the committee as it relates to the second part of Mr. Wingfield's presentation? Kyle, I think you did a pretty good job. Go put that tux on. Enjoy your
All
evening.
right. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time. All right, members, that is the end of the presentations we have this evening. I want to take a second, though, and give each member a second to make brief comments if they'd like to on what they've heard so far, and then on what they expect or anything they need or they expect from me over the next month. We'll start just at the far left of the podium, but the far right of all of our politics, of course, with Senator Sam Watson.
I have a microphone, Mr. Chairman. I'm good.
Good?
Good.
No comments. Senator Harbison?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much for the presentation and the input today. I thought it was very important. At the same time, I would just like to say I was listening very carefully to the professor and how he was characterizing Columbus. I'm sorry, not Columbus, Georgia, the state of Georgia as marvelous and really good place to live. And I was impressed by that. So I'm looking forward to us putting together something that will be reflective, inclusive of that kind of outlook. Okay.
Gotcha.
Thank you, sir.
Senator Dolezal? Nothing to add. Senator Avatarte?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Very good discussion today on all fronts, especially the Ronald Reagan part. I would ask, is it possible the appropriate your office could create a list specifically? I know we've got all these thick documents related to credits or sales tax exemptions related to anything that deals with children, moms, maternity, military, and public safety, just to understand which items those are. I'll say for the record, I don't think this committee is interested in, I think doing anything that's going to be negative towards children and moms and maternity and some of our public safety and military families across the state. But I think that is something we need to analyze as we go further.
Yeah, and if you would, please get us a letter on those topics too, but I think the first document has that, if you're looking for, looking at those, credits that are, show the ones that expire, this one.
Yep.
And just for the record, Senator Gooch had to leave for another engagement, but we know, he's listening online. Senator Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you bringing us together. It's been a very educational and good conversation. And I know that we will move forward in a fiscally responsible and conservative manner, as we always do. And I think the triggers and the taxpayer release fund would give me great comfort in any proposed legislation. Thank you.
Senator Orr,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
you want to grab your mic? I want to make sure.
Thank you for that reminder. I would recommend that we provide the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute information that they've assembled as part of the record. I had requested that they be brought to present earlier when we were taking suggestions much earlier in the process. And we're now at the very last stages. But in lieu of their not having been invited to present, that would be a request that I would make to have their data points available as part of the committee report.
Senator, if we did not include them and you'd asked me, I apologize. I'll look back to the right. I do not see that, but I will assume if you told me that verbally, then I forgot. Was it verbal?
I thought we were asked to.
Put it in writing, yeah.
In writing.
If you did, then I apologize. I've not seen that. If you still got that, please get me a copy. And I know you've got the GPBI report you were reading from earlier. We can tender your copy into the exhibits if that's okay with you.
Thank you.
Happy to do that today. Senator Kennedy, I know you're online. Do you have any comments you'd like to add?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. A good meeting, though.
And then to sum up where we are right now, I think the presentations were clear. If you believe the presenters that other states, when they have been able to reduce their income tax, they did that in a way that also allowed them to reduce their sales tax. So any comments that you have to increase sales tax, the presenters today should be able to quash that comment if you're willing to provide a wider base, which is why you've got the roughly 200 plus pages in front of you now to walk through and consider. Other comments, I thought it was extremely helpful. I appreciate Patricia and your comments about how it relates to women specifically, how Georgia does stand as a leader already in the nation, #2 place for women to start businesses right here in Atlanta. Thank you for bringing that up, and also making sure that we aren't doing something that unintendedly would hurt folks that we want to make sure aren't hurt in this process. Leader Anna Vitarte, your comments about items that you want to protect. Thank you. I think the committee shares most of those views as well. And if you don't mind, let's get that in writing so we can put it in the record along with the presentation that's coming from Senator Orrick. The next meeting, I hope I have a draft to you in advance that we can talk about where we are likely heading with this. As I told you at the first meeting, I believe the die was cast. It is not a question of if we go to zero, it's when and how we take our state income tax to zero. You see from the presentations over the past 4 meetings, and which I think were just solidified even today, of why we need to do this. It's an issue of competitiveness, not just for Georgia against other states, but it's an issue for competitiveness for Georgians who are having a hard time paying for those basic items that we talked about. You don't have to go more than a block away from this building to see folks who are having a hard time paying for home prices, paying for groceries, paying for childcare, paying for gas. And this is the best way. This is our best lever to affect them. We are not doing our job if we do not try to utilize it to help make their lives easier. If there are further comments that you wish to make in writing to be included in that last report, please get it to me. You will have a draft in advance, and I appreciate y'all being here today.
Mr. Chairman.
It is only fitting if the last comment from the committee comes from Senator Orrock. So Senator, please.
The manufacturing sales tax exemption that we, currently operate with, is that being contemplated, as a, how big, what is the dollar amount on that?
The dollar amount is in the 205 pages you got already. It's I remember the number we got originally when we voted on that proposal. I know it's a lot higher today than it was when it was presented to us. But I think what you also heard Dr. Laffer say in comments back to Senator Watson was that the proposal that they worked for in Illinois, or no, sorry, Missouri, did not tax inputs. To the extent it's not taxing inputs, we'll have to play through that again, but
Yeah, that's a number that's important for us to know, right?
it would be.
Yeah.
So it is literally right here in this report. I apologize. I can't turn to the page
Sure.
exactly right now.
The one that's about a half an inch high.
The 205 page one, yes,
Right,
ma'am.
yes.
So, there any other comments from members of the committee? Thank you for being here. I know it's going to be a busy last month. I hope you all enjoy your Thanksgiving.
You have